Page speed is going to be a mobile search ranking factor. Mute this ad is expanding. Google improves its AMP testing tool. And if you don't have at least 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, your video can't carry ads. This is Search Marketing Scoop, episode number 1. Hi, I'm David Bain and welcome to Search Marketing Scoop, the SEMrush show that brings together the top PPC and SEO folk to discuss the current headlines and how they impact you. So today's first guest is the head of SEO at Atlassian. That's the company behind Trello and Jira. He's also startup mentor at German Accelerator. So welcome to the Scoop, Kevin Indig.
Thanks, David. Good to be on.
Thanks, Kevin. Good to have you on. And guest number 2, he's the co-founder of the PPC recommendation engine Adalysis. He's also author of Advanced Google AdWords. And welcome to the Scoop, Brad Geddes.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be on the first show.
I know. The first and the best. All downhill from here. Hopefully not. So let's go back to Kevin for story number 1, and that is Google has issued updates to its AMP testing tool. It released the original tool back in October 2016, and now it's been updated to include how your AMP page may appear in the SERP in different scenarios. So Kevin, what is this all about?
Yeah, so obviously Google is putting a lot of effort into AMP. It's one of the poster child projects, and it's obviously also becoming more and more important since people use more mobile devices to surf the net, and obviously also the Google search results. So this update came with a couple of interesting features. First, as you already said, one of the things is that it allows you to see how your AMP page might appear in the Google search results. And there are basically 3 different forms for those AMP features. The first one is an AMP story with an image, which should attract a lot of clicks. The second format is a so-called top story, which is like a highlighted AMP result. And then there's the standard mobile search result in the AMP format as we know it. So I found that very interesting that Google highlights these 3 different formats. But there's a little more that you can do with it, with this new testing tool. Google especially recommends it to be used for debugging. So there's a feature where you can see the actual AMP source code, and that's helpful when you're a developer and you try to fix various issues with AMP. One of these things that play to that is that AMP has become a little more customizable over time. It's all very basic, and nowadays you are able to include more and more features. I think that rounded about up.
Great. Okay, so AMP isn't going anywhere at all, obviously. Google brought it in, a while ago now, and obviously they've been encouraging adoption of it. Does this increase in testing abilities mean that most businesses, or a lot of businesses, should now be more seriously considering utilizing AMP?
I would say yes. You should think about it no matter what, I would say. Obviously, it depends on your format, right? I think there are certain types of businesses that it's more applicable to, other businesses that it's not so much applicable to. So, for example, here at Atlassian, we don't have an overwhelming amount of mobile traffic coming in. But we do have formats like blogs or more content sites where we can utilize AMP. And you should definitely think about utilizing it no matter what, but now you have the ability to see how competitive you are in terms of the format of your result, right? So now you can play around with the images and with the top stories, and you can optimize your AMP implementation for that.
Okay, great. I tell you what, one thing also caught my attention was they're also introducing apparently a button to submit to cache and update, and that seemed to be quite a significant opportunity, certainly for publishers who were very focused on the timings of certain stories. Is this going to make a significant difference, or is it not quite as significant as I was thinking it was?
I think it just speeds up the whole debugging process or issue fixing process. So you can now Google for the phrase AMP testing tool, and you get a a little box right in the search results pages, similar to when you want to simply submit a URL to Google. And what it does is it pings the Google bots back to your page, and then Google will recrawl it, and then you could fix potential issues, which you can then also, by the way, see in the Search Console. So it also plays a little bit into the whole, relaunch of Search Console and monitoring your AMP results.
Great. Okay. Well, let's go over to Brad for story number 2, and that is back in 2012. Seems like a long time ago now. Google started giving users the option to mute ads they didn't like. So now, nearly 6 years later, they're giving users even more power. So what's happening here, Brad?
So it seems like a very subtle update, but it actually has a lot of sort of invisible far-reaching implications. But essentially, I mean, a user can click on an ad and say mute it. They're not going to see it again. Google's now connecting user devices together. So if you mute it on a phone, you won't see it on a computer. They're building more functionality of the ad preferences manager, which allows users to remove ads or change what the kind of ads they're seeing. So while it seems minor, there's actually a lot more kind of in the psychology underlying all of these changes. Okay.
I also see that what they're doing is they're allowing, or what happens when you mute an ad if your privacy settings are correct, then they'll mute that particular ad on all the different devices that person happens to own. Is that quite significant? And maybe a follow-up question as well. How many people would you find in terms of percentage actually have selected the privacy settings to let Google follow them across lots of different devices?
So pretty much everybody lets Google follow them. I mean, Google's got more than 7 products with 1 billion users, and they have 2 with over 2 billion users. So they're letting everyone do it. But the reason this is so important, right, is Google is letting people control ads. Now, by doing that, they're also shifting what individuals are looking at to the ads. So, an issue has always been you go to a site, you don't buy a product, or maybe you buy a product, you leave, and you see these reminder ads, what Google calls them. And they're annoying, right? So you can get rid of them. But by telling users, hey, you can do more with these ads. If someone doesn't want to see it, then Google gets to serve a more relevant ad in its place, increases bottom line, and it shows users they can interact with ads and do stuff with them, brings more eyeballs to it. So while it's a very subtle thing, I don't want to see this anymore. It has a lot of implications which aren't going to show up in the stats of monetizable impressions and clicks that occur from that same user base.
So is this going to be part of an ad quality score for display campaigns then?
Probably not, because if you buy something, and say you're using dynamic remarketing, right, which means a company's got 1 million products, and you buy one, and Google and their dynamic doesn't necessarily know they bought something. And so it's not that it was a bad ad, it's that they don't know to close the loop that this was a purchased product, right? Which is a technology issue right now. So you wouldn't ding someone for saying it's a bad ad because they muted it because they bought it already. So if it happens a lot for an advertiser, it may have some ding, but right now that's not really the focus. It's more on letting users see ads they want to interact with and therefore click on them and give Google more money. But it does give them more control as well. So it's actually good for users, good for advertisers, good for Google. I mean, it's actually a pretty good change.
Okay, so it's more about making users feel that they've got more control over the content, and because of that, perhaps even more likely to engage with ads in the future.
Oh, exactly, right. And if you go and you click Meet this ad, and you're taken to an ad preferences manager that says, what are you interested in, right? And users are self-selecting and telling Google what they're interested in. Google gets to use that to serve better ads, more useful ones. People don't hate ads, right? They hate irrelevant ads. There's a really huge difference. And so now you're telling Google, I want to see this. And so you feel you're in control over the ad you're seeing. Google gets to serve something more relevant. advertisers get that impression. And so the more that users interact with ads, give their preferences to someone else, saying this is what I want to see, it's just good for the ecosystem.
Now, story number 3 we're going to be discussing is that page speed is going to be a mobile search ranking factor. So it's back to Kevin for this one. It's not happening until July 2018. So Kevin, what is this really important, and why is actually Google telling us about it now as opposed to when it actually happens?
That's a good point. I want to say that this is not a huge surprise. I think it's a little bit implied in optimizing for mobile that obviously page speed is an important factor, and not just simply from an organic traffic standpoint of view, also from a user experience standpoint of view, right? So if you optimize your mobile experience, you should definitely factor that in many regards. Now, there are a couple of things to understand about this announcement from Google. The first is that they downplay the effect a little bit, and they say that it is more an update that might affect very slow pages, right? So I think it is less a boost that fast pages get, and that's speculation from my side, but the way they phrased it, it sounds more like they're gonna push down slower pages in the search results. Now, another very interesting aspect was how strongly they pointed out the impact of user intent and relevant content. Now, it's also no news to the SEO community, but I've never really seen Google mentioning that so clearly. So what they said is that a page might not load as quickly, but if it meets user intent and if it has very relevant content, it might still rank very highly. So that I found very interesting.
Great. Okay. So we're broadcasting live on Facebook and YouTube at the moment, actually, and recording this show for a podcast to be released in the near future. So on Facebook at the moment, we've got a few people watching. So hi to everyone watching on Facebook. Andrew Simpson says, this is a great idea. Hello from New Jersey. So hello to Andrew, and thanks for commenting. I will try and have a look at comments as we move along, and if your question appears in front of me here, perhaps even mention that as part of the discussion. But still on this topic, Kevin, what would you say developers can do at the moment to ensure or try and give them a good chance that this update isn't going to be an issue for their business when it actually arrives in 2008 in July? Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly the right question. So there are a couple of things that you can do. First, Google hints or points out to use tools like Chrome Lighthouse, which is which you can find in the Chrome Developer Console. Tools like PageSpeed tool from Google, obviously, and then the Chrome UX report to find issues with your page loading time. On top of that, I want to recommend tools like webpagetest.org, Pingdom, or GTmetrix. The thing with page speed is not as straightforward. There are lots of metrics, and Google just recently introduced more metrics than just the DOM content loading time. And all these tools say different stuff. So you basically want to get, lots of different opinions and then find the patterns of what all these tools have in common and what they say. Another thing is are applicable tips that always make sense, so to say, right? So what I can strongly recommend is compressing images, scripts like CSS and JavaScript, and caching them, of course, using CDNs, content delivery networks, to make sure that your site is also loading fast in other parts of the world. And finally, to optimize the critical rendering path. And you can do that with lazy loading, which you basically, the very, very basic idea of that is to have the most important elements load the quickest and then defer all the other things and scripts a little more back.
So many tips there. I think someone's got to go back a minute there and note all that down. It's thanks for sharing that there. And I liked your mention of user experience, because that was obviously your first point there, and something that Google highlighted as part of this post. How can Google tell that something is a good user experience?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of speculation around this right now. What we can say with data that the SEO community has been exploring for a couple of years already is the short versus long click. And that basically means how satisfied are people when they come to your page. And I'm saying this because it's a relative concept, right? If you're looking up the soccer or football scores from last week, then your time on the page might just take a couple of seconds, while as where you are trying to understand I don't know, the Civil War, then you spend probably a couple minutes or maybe even an hour on a page. So but relative to user intent and what you're trying to figure out, you should look at how long people are staying on your page. And then obviously it's a bad signal when people are coming to your page and they right away go back to the search results and click another search result. And this is something that Google can actually measure.
Right, okay. I love using the website usertesting.com as well, because it's easy for SEOs or technical digital marketers to focus on what has happened and just dive into analytics. But I think if you can actually get the real opinion of people who are visiting your website for the first time and the challenges that they actually face with using your website, it's a lot of things can come to mind that you didn't necessarily think of to begin with because you were a little bit too blind because you've been on the same website too often yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point, David. And other tools that I recommend in the same aspect or same discussion are, for example, Inspectlet, Hotjar, OmniConvert, and there are a couple of others that don't come to mind. But what you can also do with these tools is you can do session recordings. So you can actually see how users move through your site. And when there's a page that's not ranking well, but you are confident that the content is good and you might have some backlinks, then you can actually spot some issues and spots where people might drop off with those tools. Now, obviously, with GDPR coming, in May, that's going to be interesting to see how those tools are still applicable. But generally, I absolutely agree. You should definitely monitor and see what users do on your site.
GDPR, that's a show in itself, but we don't have enough time for that at the moment. Go and look that one up, dear listener. Hopefully you've heard of that. I'm sure you have. But the final story goes to Brad, and that is Google have announced that they're going to be having a new threshold for YouTube channels to actually carry ads. So if you've got a YouTube channel yourself, you now have to have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of watch time in the past 12 months in order to include ads. So is this nothing but good news for advertisers, Brad?
This is also good news, right? It's rare that we have two Google updates, and I'm happy with both of them. So it's a good week. So when we look at last year, right? Last year, after the election, was the rise of the fake news stories, a much more extremist content, so forth. And so brand name advertisers were supporting this kind of information. And users, right? This wasn't necessarily always advertiser driven. Users were writing advertisers saying, did you know your content is here? Did you know you're supporting this? Right. And so we can see how much users actually care about the ads and what's going on. And large companies went, wow, this is terrible. We don't like the brand. The users don't like the brand. And they ripped a lot of money out of YouTube and even the Google Display Network and so forth. And then Google went, okay, we have to do something here, right? You take all your money home and we have to monetize YouTube. So they initially launched with a new set of criteria. They did add some category blockers, and it didn't go quite far enough. And so now they're going even further. And it does hurt the small digital publisher. I mean, 4,000 hours viewed is a fair number of hours, right, in 12 months. But it does raise the threshold of the quality and how much it's viewed before ads are shown. When you think this from also Google's monetization standpoint, it's not just about ads, right? They have to review this. So YouTube, it's something like when an hour of YouTube is uploaded every 15 seconds or something insane. So algorithms only catch 83% of that, which means 17% is hand reviewed. So by saying, here's a threshold, if you're below it, you can't serve ads, but also our humans don't have to watch all this content, and we're not paying salary for this. So there is more than just one aspect when we look at larger business side of this. But overall, it's a good change. YouTube and some of the GDN quality had really dropped. And this gives advertisers more feel that their ads are on legitimate places. It lets Google get some of those dollars back. And it again kind of shows, right? Users are paying attention to the ads. I mean, they started a lot of these write-in campaigns.
So to use a phrase from Steve Jobs, are we seeing the end of amateur hour? Is YouTube moving to a place where a lot of the production is high quality, almost professional, and we're not going to have, in the years ahead, people just taking shaky videos themselves, content that's not so good, and being able to monetize that kind of content?
I mean, I think you've got this middle ground, right? I mean, take this show. Now, it's well produced, right? You're doing a great job, David, as always, right? But this is, you're not in a, $100,000 studio with, audio being recorded and remixed and this and that, right? You're the low-level professional, high-level amateur, and I'm not quite sure where you fit in there. I mean, you're very good at this, but you don't have $1 million studio budget. So you're going to easily get 4,000 hours of this watch per year, right? That's not going to be a problem. You put this show on for a year, you'll have 1,000, if not, 15, 20,000 subscribers. So you're sort of like, this is high-quality content that will be viewed enough that you should be able to serve ads. Now, should me taking my cell phone and recording the deer outside my house right now, putting on YouTube, serve ads as I scream at things? No, right? No one wants it anyway. So it's not so the death of the amateur, but if it's the death of poor content, I'm all for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. So, especially your comments about the show. That's
yeah, so hopefully they are positive comments, right?
Absolutely. It gives everyone a hope, hopefully. One other thing that Google have also mentioned is that they're going to be employing, I'm not sure if that's the right word, but having up to 10,000 people reviewing content for its Google Preferred advertising. Is this something that's going to be sustainable for them? I think they mentioned something about training AI to make better decisions in the future.
Well, that's what this is all about, right? So, Google, we could go back to organic for years on this, right? Where Google first hires a whole lot of quality raters and they say, okay, you fill out this form, give us a feedback. They feed that to the machine goes, oh, I can recognize that signal now. You lose your job to the machine. And now next set of raters, you do this, right? And this is a really common thing in sort of like the machine learning industry of you need enough data for a machine to understand. So we take the humans, we take the input, whether it's Google hiring raters or Amazon Mechanical Turk, and then give the machine more pieces and more data points to work from. And that's always the issue with machine learning. It can't start from zero. So this is them getting the machine to 75 and then letting it work from there.
Well, that just about takes us up to the end of the first episode, so just time for an actionable tip from each of our guests. So this can be related to, or not necessarily related to, what we've been discussing so far. So back to Kevin again. So Kevin, what would be your actionable tip?
Yeah, I'm trying to keep it relevant to SEO, and we mentioned relevant content before and how that plays into the mobile page speeds update, so to say. And so my tip is the following. So usually for relevant content, you want to answer a lot of questions that people have. Plus, those questions often display featured snippets in the search results. And so the better you answer that question, the more relevant you are for the question, the higher your chance to get a featured snippet, which then opens the door for voice search and for more clicks, obviously. And so a good way that I've identified to do that is to check the questions and answers on Amazon. So on Amazon, you find the most upvoted answers to the most asked questions for every product, and those are usually really good answers. And so if you can relate products to the topic that you're trying to rank for, then check out Amazon. And then obviously there are a couple of other sites as well, where people ask questions. It has to be user generated, and then you basically take these questions and you answer them in your content. That could be a summary of the best answers or your own answer, and that increases your chance to get a featured snippet and get more organic traffic.
Love that. And I especially like the fact that you know that these phrases are all commercially relevant because people are searching for them on Amazon. So, wonderful tip. Thank you very much. You can find Kevin over at kevin-indig.com. And now Brad. So, Brad, what is your actionable tip, sir?
So, take everything Kevin said and change the word featured snippet to ad, right? Ads are relevant content as well, right? They're useful. Google measures long clicks, short clicks on the ads. So when you think of your ads, I mean, we've proved in the news, users are actually paying attention to ads, right? It must be relevant, must be useful. So, look at those ads, test out those messages to ensure you're putting the relevant content in your ad to, obviously the relevant page then, that'll make that user convert. But users are paying attention to the ads. This has been a clear trend for years now. And so that really fine content of the ads and the ad testing is going to be even more and more important going forward as some of these things bring, more and more like global focus as far as, muting, who can show them, so forth. People care about the ads. They got to be relevant though.
I love that. Ads are content as well. I think, too often big digital marketing departments have people sitting in silos and not necessarily utilizing each other's skills, but having content at the heart of a successful ad campaign is essential. And in fact, I remember seeing another quote by you, Brad, saying that, if I get the quote right, I think if there's an issue with your paid search campaign, then 99% of the time it is your landing page. Is that correct?
It's yes, right? Because if you're getting someone to the page, they're not converting, it's your landing page, right? So we use the same tools as Kevin mentioned, right? Hotjar and what's our page speed and analytics, right? It's the same tools. You just use them in slightly different ways. User recording sessions are fantastic from the paid side too.
Great. Okay, well, you can find Brad over at bgtheory.com. And I've been your host, David Bain, and hopefully I still might be next time. You can also find me over at digitalmarketingradio.com. So we will be recording the next episode 2, at the same time, same place. That's 12 p.m. EST or 5 p.m. GMT on Monday, the 12th of February. That's on the SEMrush Facebook page, when my guests next time will be New York-based SEO consultant Bridget Randolph and UK-based paid search specialist Jim Banks. In the meantime, thanks not only to Kevin and Brad, but also to you, dear viewer, wherever you happen to be watching. It was great to have you here as well. But until next time, be fantabulous and do one thing that scares you. Adios.